Restream. Beautiful. We are live on Restream, and now it's going to go to record in 3, 2, and I'm just going to get right into it. Okay, Daniel?
Yeah, let's do it.
Welcome to another episode of $1 Million Stories, where I get to interview a lot of my clients, more specifically, best-selling authors who have stories and lessons to share with the world. And today I got a special guest. He shares my belief in the higher power, in God, and I just loved interviewing him whenever it came to this content, because spirituality really played a factor in my life. In his book, The Accountable Life, it turns out that all the stuff I've read in the Bible is exactly right. All the stuff in religion is exactly wrong, and all the society is a religion in one form or another. That leads me to conclude that the kingdom of God is in the mind of each of us. Jesus is the key to the kingdom because he brings the hope of life and forgiveness of ourselves and others. That hope is what leads to change of the nature that society programmed on us. So here we go. We got a guy that he's going to be talking all about his book, The Accountable Life, which you could pick up on Amazon as a bestseller. As of right now, it is on Amazon. Daniel Walker, thanks so much for being here, man.
Mike, thanks for having me. Thanks so much for publishing my book and getting me out of my head and getting me out on the pages where other people can give me feedback and help refine my message.
Yeah, man, I think I saw a major transformation in the clarity factor, right? You started to see how it was just a shape of clay, and then it became real. And since the book came out, tell us a little bit about your life. I haven't talked to you in a couple of weeks, but what has happened? How are you different? Are people coming to you? Do they see what you stand for? Do they take you more seriously? What has happened since the book came out?
Well, I got out of my head. Like I said, my normal patterns for which I was raised and the way that I saw the world, the way that I talked to myself, came down to phraseology. I don't know if that's a word or not, but that's how it hit me, is the cutting edge of my words really sharp, really cut other people. And I was completely unaware of that because I had thick skin, because I talked to myself that way from birth. And when I wrote my book, I realized, I actually put the words on paper and had other people read them back to me. Man, it was rough. I was definitely more of a lump of coal than a big old diamond. And putting it in words, getting feedback has really helped me soften my edges, but it strengthens my message. And I'm really thankful for that.
Well, what I noticed, and you made a post, I think it was a couple weeks ago, and you were offering some type of coaching or some type of consulting, and a lot of people reached out to you, said, "Hey, I'm interested." And I was just really blown away that there was, people saw you put out this book, this message, it seems like is resonating with people. And now they may be coming to you because you've left the breadcrumbs behind to show where you come from and where you're at now. So it's sort of a glimmer of hope for those around you. Is that right?
That's the whole message. I mean, that's the message of Christ. I don't clarify myself as a Christian. I think the Christian religion is absolutely necessary, and it's the bridge for the lost. But it is the milk. It's the people that don't have Christ, to give them hope. Because once you wake up and realize who you've been your whole life, and you're going to have to deal with some guilt, and you're going to have to deal with some uncomfortable things. And when I left the religion of Christianity after about 25 years of being in a solid church, learning the Word of God, I couldn't find Jesus there. Not that he wasn't there, it's just I couldn't find him there. And where I found Jesus was in my wake, inside the broken hearts of all those people that had suffered me. And that's where I found Jesus, and that's where I found the hope that I can be better than that. I can do better than that, and I can bring some healing to those people that I damaged. And in doing that, I got past what I thought was success, which was business or making money. But actual success is being free to be who you are and have other people love you for that.
Man, you just bring up a very good point. There are so many people out there who find success, but they don't find happiness, right? So your origin story of where you come from, an amazing job and everything that you put together, but it wasn't fulfillment. So can you tell us a little bit about your path and maybe your defining moment, that origin story, the ground zero moment that changed it all?
Well, sure. I mean, my story starts back when I married a perfect woman that was my rock and let me beat my head against that rock, and she did not move until my head cracked, and all that ugliness went away and the insecurities went away, and I found out who I am, and it's okay to be different than everyone else. In fact, that's the only way you can be. You can never be the same as someone else. And the lie that society tells you is that you're exactly like everyone else. We're all the same, but we're not. We're each an individual perspective of creation, and every story is valid. Every story is true from that perspective. And when you look through a telescope and look at the moon, if you get all the lenses and variables lined up just right, and you're in perfect clarity, but then swing that over to Mars and look at it, it's not going to be in focus. So you have to change your perspective to look at something differently in order to see it clearly. And the only way you can do that in life is to listen to other people's perspectives and know that they are just as valid and just as true as yours. And then doing that, that's really what integrity is knowing your perspective and setting it aside to allow someone else to develop theirs. And then you focus between the two on the results that you want. And so I came to all that because my wife stayed with me through all those miserable years of me trying to figure all that stuff out through my insecurities. I ran my business. I was highly successful. I did it for almost 20 years until I stepped out of it and got into a completely different line of business in which I had to become a completely different person in order to make that business successful. And in that growth is when I started reading books. And I believe that we're all just time travelers traveling forward in time, 1 second per second. Someone denies that. And I just say, well, were you in the past and will you be in the future? Then you must be a time traveler. And if you're going forward into time, 1 second per second, so let's say you lived your entire life for 70 years. And at the end of those 70 years, you put all your knowledge and all your highlights into a book that I could read in about 4 hours. I have now collapsed time for me, and I've added your 70 years to mine in 4 hours. That makes me a time traveler. And I can now live, thousands and thousands of years of knowledge in the capacity of my life.
Oh, that's a good way to put it, right? You're just condensing time for the next person, for someone else. Therefore, if you do pick up the books and you watch the documentaries and you feed off of the giants ahead of you, you really could live thousands of years in a few short years, right? That's
exactly
great.
And I have. It's awesome.
So I want to get into the spiritual side here, because I think I told you this during the interview. I had a really low point in 2016, 2017. I looked at the cross that I got from Rome. I said, God, show me a sign. I know you're not supposed to tempt him, but I said, show me a sign that I'm supposed to do this book business. And I got to my parents' house to eat dinner that night because I was dead broke. And an individual out of the blue called me, said, hey, I'm ready to go. Let's do the book. That money kept my lights on, kept my house, kept the business going for an extended amount of time. So it was my sign to stay on the path. And that's when I really, really bought in. I've been a Catholic my whole life. Now I don't identify as a Catholic, but I was a Catholic my whole life. And then I became a non-denominational Christian. And that's when I really felt like there was a relationship with God. That gave me sort of a superpower to go after my dreams. Do you have this moment in time where it was like, God is with me? Did you always have that? Did it hit you in one day? And tell us a little bit about it.
Well, in my sufferings of my success of making the money, my family did not enjoy who I was, and my adult kids walked away from me saying, that's not who I want to be. That's not who I want to be around. And it was such a blessing to me, because that was the only thing that allowed me to move from where I was at, from my position of being right. And in doing so, I had to re-examine my entire life and why I was the way I was, and go back in history and relive those moments from this side with reflection and the knowledge I gained from the book, so I could actually reframe all those things and make them mean something completely different. And one of those things that it showed me in that process is that everything's a narrative, everything's a story. Oh. And we choose the stories that we tell ourselves, and they can mean whatever we want them to mean. And so what I've done recently, and literally, Mike, this stuff's developing in me every week. It gets further and further down the road, because I end up asking myself, why am I so miserable? I'm doing exactly what I want to do. Why am I so miserable? And I've asked that question 1,000 times. And it's like, oh, I'm not miserable at all. I'm enjoying being miserable. And now, I'm a smart guy. Yeah. I'm a smart guy, and that puzzled me. I was like, how do I enjoy being miserable? That makes no sense whatsoever. Until I realized, after I chased that for a few weeks, that it's my distraction. I don't have to face my character flaws if I can just say I'm not worthy and feel crappy about myself. If I can just point my finger at other people and blame them for them not accepting me as I am, then I can use that as a distraction. So I don't have to fix the character flaws that I have in myself, so that I can hold myself accountable for the way that they're writing me in their story. It's not about caring what they think. It's about they're writing a story of history, and they all weave together. And so I have many, many different aspects of my personality. And if someone's looking at me from a lens of one of my lower aspects of my life, then I don't deny that. I accept that and say, thank you so much for showing me how I show up in your life. I will take the responsibility, and I will work on myself so that I can show up differently in your life. And I can make sure that your priorities take priority over mine in some areas. And then in doing that, you learn how to build relationships. And that's really what life is all about. But shifting the narrative from the Christian perspective, which I believe is 100% necessary and right. I think the stake that they're talking about in the Bible, when you move from milk to meat, is to change the narrative of the Bible. You know, many books start with once upon a time, and then they tell a story. Our Bible starts with in the beginning, which is similar to once upon a time. That doesn't mean it's a fairy tale. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it is the story of creation. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So God made a creation, and this book is the story of that creation. And in doing so, it's like he made a big old painting, and he really liked it. He said it was good, but he wanted more from it. So he came into that painting, into that creation, and he used the materials and chemicals and minerals that he had made in that creation to make himself a creation suit. And then he inhabited that suit. And literally, you're plugged in 5D. He's plugged in 5D into his creation, experience a full immersion of what it's like to feel and taste and see and all the things. And he did that, and he said it was good, but it was a little bit boring after a while, I would imagine, because there's no interaction. There's no highs and lows. It's just a steady thing. So he literally tore himself in two, putting some of his aspects in one half, some of his aspects in the other, and then made those two attract each other. And now he has two different perspectives, but actually an infinite number of perspectives of his creation. So I believe that each of us are experiencing his creation from a unique perspective. And that little voice inside your head that's always talking, that's talking directly to God, telling him your experience of your life, telling him what's going on. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, that's hot. Oh, I wish that. Oh, I like her. I mean, whatever you're saying, whatever that voice is saying, you're directly downloading that straight to God. And the Bible gives us the principles to say that he only wants to hear good things. So don't let that voice run wild and just report whatever's happening. Take control of that voice like a joystick to run your avatar the way you want it to go, and report back to the programmer, report back to the creator of the entire thing, what it is that you're experiencing, and appreciate him for what it is. But as he tells you in the Bible, that everything that happens to you is for your good. So when that voice inside of you can get in alignment with that and receive it as only being good, no matter what it is, whether you desire it or not, your life changes in a magnificent way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those stories you're talking about, those narratives, because everything is a story. I'm glad you brought that up, because we buy into them at a very young age, and they're very hard to break the older you get. Your book is called The Accountable Life.
That's a story, brother. You said it's very hard to break. That's a story. I don't want to let you get by with that one.
Yeah. So, but for the average person out there, usually they hit a certain point and they relive the same story over and over and over. And it's tough for the average person to break. Maybe that's the best way to put it. So why is that? What is it just something that we tell ourselves, and we've been telling ourselves that our whole life, so therefore it becomes habit, and we are a product of our habits? Can you explain that?
Well, it comes down to desires, and we think we're not something, and we desire to be that thing. And all that's required to be that thing is to accept that you are. But for some reason, we have this thing where we have to prove it to ourselves that we are that. So we go through the struggles so we can prove to ourselves that we are capable of having those desires. And we just fight that same battle over and over again. All we have to do is accept that we're already that. And so instead of letting life come at us and just fighting it as we slug it out, we could choose a result, accept that is who we are, and then understand everything else is just the process of experiencing it. And enjoy that experience. Because when Moses went to the mountain and said, "Who should I say that sent me?" He said, "I am." He said, I believe he was saying, if you have breath in your lungs, you're there because I sent you. And that doesn't matter what you're doing. That doesn't matter where you're at. And I know, and that's where I separate from Christianity. Christianity says there's good and there's evil. And I believe that's a good message, and it has to be told, because the people that are completely illiterate, people that are coming from nothing, they have to be able to have some sort of separation from what they know and what they don't know. And that those early years in Christianity, that's what that is it says there's a mystical God out there that is separate from you. And you have to change, and you have to forgive yourself. You have to act different. But I think it's just a ploy to get you into the learning of the word. And so you can forgive yourself for being all those things you were. You know, if you look at the story of creation as the story of creation, you know, like any experiment, there's going to be a lot of failures to start off with. And I think mankind did that. They always chose paths that led them into self-indulgence. They always chose paths that chose themselves over society. And over time, thousands of years, there finally became a path, a guy named Noah, who was actually living to his conscience. And that was all God needed. That's all the creator needed to say, okay, I'm going to start over again with you. And you're going to have to teach your family how to live to their conscience. And what happened after the flood, he came back and he did not do that. And mankind went off again for thousands of years in all kinds of different tangents that did not serve them the way they want to be served, until a guy named Abraham came along. And he again lived to his conscience. And God said, if you will live and teach all of your seed, I know you have none, but if you teach all of your seed these things, I'll bless the whole earth through you. And Abraham committed to do that and followed through by literally sacrificing his son. God stopped him from actually sacrificing, but he was committed to doing that. And in doing so, he proved to God that, yes, I will teach my family your laws. And God gave him the Abrahamic laws. And those laws helped the formulation of societies over time. And that's what the Jews are. The Jews are society builders. You know, they teach their kids today the same way the kids were taught 5,000 years ago about the Torah and about the beginnings of the world, so that they know who they are from the beginning. And then I think that went along for a long time, and we built societies all over the world. And then Jesus came and said, hey, guys, you did awesome. You built all kinds of societies. But now that time has gone through, the reason you guys were given that knowledge and the reason you guys were building the societies was for all those people that don't have the knowledge that you guys are born into. And so it has to work that way. But it's now we're at the point, I believe, where it is about the people that don't have Christ in their heart, that don't know that that voice inside your head is what you have to control. And for me, it looks like a joystick. I'm a ditch digger by trade. And I like sitting in a track hoe and I'm looking out there at the dirt and my bucket, but I'm moving my hand. I'm controlling the joystick, and what happens, you know, without looking at it, it's internal. And I think that's the way that most people do not look at it. But man, it's such a freedom thing to look at it that way.
What have you noticed over the past couple of years in society when it comes to faith and spirituality? I think that if you really want to break everything down to why things crumble, I think it's because maybe it seems like it's not cool to believe in God or to have a faith. It's almost like there's this push from society to remove religion or remove faith from the soul. And that is usually a recipe for disaster. I think that's what's happening in schools and the systems around us. So that to me is a major stepping stone to destruction. Are you seeing the same thing? Do you notice that this is a common characteristic of society today, that spirituality and faith is just being removed slowly but surely?
I don't subscribe to that at all. I think when God created heaven and earth, he set in force certain laws, period. And they're undeniable. And we're talking like the laws of gender, the laws of reciprocation, the laws of density. I mean, these things interact all the time. And creation is just those laws interacting with each other. Now, there's a separate set of laws for society, and that's outside of creation, but they operate within those laws of creation. So society, the reason that society crumbles is because it's built on things that are not real. They're built on things, you know, if we really wanted to change society, we would stop pointing our fingers at anyone else and start looking in the mirror and changing the things that are going inside of our heads. You know, stop judging other people, because you cannot judge another person unless you actually accept that they have a valid point of view and you love them where they're at. And then you add context to their context, but you cannot deny their context and expect them to receive what your context is. That's not how it works. So if we would zoom way out and get outside of ourselves and understand that if we want to move society better, society bigger, society in the direction that we all want it to go, then we have to start doing it with ourselves. You know, the Democrats should not be telling the Republicans what to do and what's wrong and what's right. The Democrats should be telling the Democrats, hey, you're outside the lines here. Get back inside the lines. Same with the Republicans on the other side. Same with Christians. We shouldn't be telling LGBT what they're doing right or wrong. We should not. We should be showing ourselves why our judgment of them limits us. We should be dealing that with ourselves, because those people need to be loved just the same as the Christians need to be loved, just the same as everyone else needs to be loved. And people are who they are because they have the experiences and the context they have. And if we do not accept their context and know that it's real for them, even though to us it might be complete nonsense, complete just well outside of our grasp, we have to recognize that's our limit, not theirs. It's not their responsibility to make us understand. It's our responsibility to go where they're at and understand them where they are, so that we can love them where they're at. And then maybe in that context, relieve some of their suffering if they are and if they desire it.
Wow. Yeah, you bring up a good point when it comes to projecting. It seems like it is just common habit for everyone to project outward that it's someone else's fault. And this inward look can be very scary, but it's very freeing, right? If everything around you is, because it will wake you up to the fact that maybe everything around you that you've created is it's your doing. But if it's your doing, that also means that you can be the one that's the hero of your own story. You can fix it all, right? You can have the peace of mind. You can build the business. You can have the relationships by fixing you, not the world, right?
Right. Yeah. If you want to have, if you desire to have a relationship with someone that does not desire to have a relationship with you, you can lament the discrepancy there, or you can make the changes that you believe you need to change so that you can show up for them in their life in a way they would appreciate, rather than showing up in a way that they do not appreciate.
What did you change? You said that you had a tough relationship maybe with your kids, with your family, and you changed and you started to treat them differently, or were you treating yourself differently, which by nature treated them differently? So what did you adjust in your life?
I adjust the way I think about other people, and I adjust the way the way I show up for other people. I did not chase my relationships. I accepted that they separated me from me on with intention, and it was up to them to come back to me in intention. So rather than going after them, I went after being the person that they would want to be with, and in doing so, they drew back to me. And that's what I changed. I changed who I was. With no tie to the outcome. I did not know that would allow them to come back to me, but it did, thankfully. But I did it just because they said that I wasn't good enough, and I believed them. You know, with my marriage, my wife's going to flip out because I'm talking about this on camera. But you know, a few years ago, we were going through a tough time, and she indicated to me that she wanted to leave, and I asked her if she could replace me, and she snapped her fingers and says, "Like that." And that's hard for a husband to hear, especially someone that's taken care of her for so long. I mean, we've been married for almost 27 years. And what I did is I chose to believe her, that she saw me as completely replaceable in an instant. And what a disaster that was for me to live a life where that's how I showed up for her in her life. So what I did is I elevated my game and decided to never, ever again be perceived as replaceable. And it changed my marriage. And in changing my marriage, it changed the relationship with my kids, because now they understand that dad's not who he used to be.
Wow. Yeah. How many people right now are truly replaceable, right? They become comfortable. They stop doing everything they did to either get that relationship or become the person that got that relationship. And then they just start to get a little bit lazy, and that makes them replaceable. And so if you look at yourself as a person who provides value, that never ends, right? You have to serve the many, for service to the many leads to greatness. And maybe if you stop serving at a certain point, you become replaceable, and the people around you take notice of that. Wow, that was probably a scary conversation. And then a light bulb went on and never looked back.
Well, I don't use the terms like scary because I believe anxiety is nothing more than the laziness of the imagination. People get bound up in thinking to a certain point and pulling it out and saying, oh my God, what if this happens? This could happen. And if you understand the difference between probability and possibility, you do everything you can to increase your probability of getting the things you desire, but you're very aware of the things that you're doing that create possibilities for it to go way wrong. And if you can disseminate those two things from each other and see how they work together, then all things are possible to you and life gets pretty easy. But when people suffer from anxiety, they come to me and say, hey, can you help me with my anxiety? And I was like, well, why are you claiming that you have anxiety? And they go through this whole thing of the story they told themselves, this narrative that they have, that they claim they don't want, but yet they recreate it every day and live in it. And they're just suffering. They're looking for a pill, an easy way out. And I'm like, what is the worst possible thing that can happen? Tell me. And each and every time they tell me the worst possible thing, I said, all you have to do is get to that point and say, okay, that's happened. Now what? It's real. That happened. Now what? Life goes on. You're going to move on. Where are you at in 5 years from that point? And within minutes, their anxiety has completely disappeared forever because they realize that anytime they are living in fear or anxiety or it's scary, they're just projecting the worst possible outcome and not thinking past that.
The older I get, the more I understand free will. And you bring up something that may shock people, that you said there's no evil in the world, right? And the way I look at it, and this is something I get from Jordan Peterson, and he talks about why is the snake in the garden? Why is there this evil force that's trying to coax Eve into eating the apple? And it's basically, what if the snake makes us better? What if the difficulty of making the choice actually forms you into a better person? By saying no to that temptation, it actually makes you better. And that free will, the older I get, I understand it more, because that is why you see so much destruction in this world, that we were given free will for a reason, and some people choose poorly based off of their temptation. So when you say there's no evil, what do you mean by that?
The word enemy is, well, let me back up. The word person, let's define that for a minute. We are a collection of perspectives and hopes and dreams and desires and experiences. That's who we are.
Persona is the original root word for that, right? Which means mask.
Right.
It's a mask.
Right.
Okay.
And our personality is our personal reality. That's how we see things, right? So if we can understand that we have many, many different aspects to our personal reality. Sometimes we got to be mean. Sometimes we got to be nice. Sometimes we got to be kind. Sometimes we got to be tough. I mean, there's just all these different aspects of ourselves, and those combine to be one person. And if you look at the word enemy, N-A-M-E, I-N-A-M-E, enemy.
Enemy.
Enemy. And I was reading John 10:10, where it says the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come to give you life and life to the full. I'm like, well, who's the thief to come to steal, kill, and destroy? I'm the thief. I'm the one that comes into my head and steals and kills and destroys my hopes, my dreams, by responding the way I've always responded to the things that got me the results I didn't want, but holding on to those actions rather than letting go of those results. And it's just that simple. Is you can simply just say, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to do different. And I know the Christians are going to have a conniption fit about me talking about that. And I'm not trying to do it to be hurtful. I understand that different people are in different stages of their life, and this may not be for everyone. This is just what worked personally for me to deliver me from the misery of my life, the suffering, the suicide, the depression, the anxiety, the insecurity that was my life for so many decades. And I lay that down and I walk in complete joy and peace every moment of my life, understanding that if there's a thought in my head, it's there because I enjoy it. And if I claim to be miserable in that, I'm enjoying being miserable on purpose as a distraction to take a break from the onward slot that is always allowing me to move forward towards my bigger desires.
Are you a fan of Carl Jung, the clinical psychologist? Have you ever read his stuff?
I have not read his stuff. I read a couple of snippets, and I'm a huge fan of what I've read so far.
And I read somebody give a quick little summary of who he was. He is probably the most well-renowned clinical psychologist, one of them at least. But he's also buried by mainstream nowadays. And it's because the guy summed up it's because he realized later in his life that every question eventually becomes a spiritual question. And there are people in the mainstream who do not like that, I think. So that really hit home that, he became very wise. His stuff evolved over time, but amazing stuff. So do you buy into what he just said, that every question that you ask eventually comes down to this, what you believe, right? The spirituality of, and maybe your faith. So do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, we're not separate from our faith. If we have breath in our lungs, we have faith. We're either believing for or against something. We're believing something's right or something wrong. We can't stop that. It's all faith. And once you realize that, I think people will question themselves and say, why am I believing against myself? Like, I have faith that I'm not worthy. Why do I have that faith whenever that doesn't get the result that I want? It's like, yes, I understand that in some aspects of my life, I could come up short of being worthy, but let's just fix that, not condemn it to be that way forever. And when I think faith, it goes back to that everyone's a unique perspective of creation, just reporting back to God with that little voice inside your head, what you're experiencing. And you can use that voice to create any experience you want, and you can experience what's going on in creation and react to it any way you want to. You just have to be in control of that little joystick, making sure that you're looking outward, but you're maneuvering from a position internally.
I was interviewing a guy for a book recently, and he talks about what it says in the Bible about love your neighbor as you love yourself. And of course, we've heard that many, many times. But if you look at those words and how they're ordered, it's love your neighbor as you love yourself. So if you do not treat yourself well, you are obviously doing a disservice to God, right? And if you treat someone even better than you treat yourself, that's also a disservice to God. You should love your neighbor as you love yourself. So treat yourself well, just like you treat others well. And it sounds like what you're saying there is that the more you treated yourself better, started to understand yourself, maybe you were a better person to those around you. Did you notice that? Is that in congruence with what you learned?
It was a back and forth. It wasn't a think of myself better. It was a think of them better. That was really the first step that I started. Is I elevated my children's opinion of me above mine. And there was the only opinion that I would elevate above mine. And once I did that, it made me realize that I needed to reach so that I could understand why they saw me the way they saw me. And when I started judging other people the way that they judged people, which is a higher version of themselves than I had ever had, then I could start seeing that people are good. People are naturally good. I mean, you look at the cabal that's going on in the world today, and what's what us patriots and Christians and all that stuff call the evil ones. They just have a much longer version of what society is going to be. It's like we look at it as they're trying to take away our freedoms and control us. But we are so interested in our own little small lives that we're not considering society as a whole. We're not considering the long-term effects of creation, because humankind is only here in creation for a short time. The Bible's not the story of mankind, it's the story of creation. And it's developed over thousands of years, and it will go on for thousands of years, regardless of what anyone feels like is going to happen, because the end of the world as we know it is coming. Creation is going to continue until it doesn't. And I don't expect that we will be here for that. It will be well into the future. And so if we can look at life zoomed way out apart from ourselves, and look at those initial creation laws and live our lives as though those laws are just interacting with each other. And then all we're here to do is love ourselves, report back our experiences, and give people the space to experience their creation the way that they're experiencing it, and help them in their suffering, or help them recognize that their suffering is a choice, not a fact, not a decision. What you suffered yesterday, you do not have to suffer again today unless you choose to. And I understand that many things come into life. The traumas and dramas of life are nothing more than how you perceive the world is supposed to be versus how you find it to be. And the only difference between a traumatized person and a healed person is what they think. You can't see anything on the outside. It's all internal. And so when people lament what happened to them, and I've dealt with some really bad things that have happened to people. Just yesterday, I ran into a lady that had a really rough childhood. I mean, just the worst imaginable. And she lived with that grief, that misunderstanding, that pain for decades. And she lived as just a beat down person. And she has the biggest heart, and she's so kind and sweet. but she was beat down because she couldn't understand those things. And I just said, do you mind if we take a snapshot of your story and put it in a safe? It'll always be protected. You can always come back to that story if you want to. But if you will give that story up and make space for that narrative to be different. She goes, Daniel, how could that narrative be any different than what it is? And I said, because there are millions of people out there just like you. And they need to hear your story. They need to see that you have conquered those demons, that you have overcome those past memories of what that meant. And now you're so grateful to have the strength that you have today, because you lived for decades after that. And today is the last day that you will find that in misery if you change your story and change your narrative. You can begin today to start training yourself so that in 10 years, 5 years, two months, if you want to, you can go find those people that are suffering the way that you suffered for decades, and you can offer them hope. You can offer them forgiveness. You can offer them a path forward that's separate from the narrative that they're locked into, that is guaranteed to produce the same results in their life they've always had. And you have to pry their fingernails out of their story sometimes. And it's not always comfortable for them. In fact, it's very discomfortable. But they are so strong, and they can do it with the right encouragement and within the right sense. And that lady will change the lives of millions of people going forward, because she now understands that what has happened has happened. There's nothing she can do to undo it. It was horrible. It was catastrophic. It should never have happened. I'm against all of that. But now that it's happened, lamenting it, wishing it was different, changing it, all that stuff, it can't happen. You have to reframe it so that you can go forward and make the most good from it, being the person you want to be.
Man, that makes me think of a speech by Nick Santanastasso, and it really is all about inner child work, going back to the moment that it happened and reframing it, right? Putting a new spin on it, and then that's the beginning. That's your origin story. That's your hero's arc, if you will. It's great.
Yeah. And the thing is that you can do that every day in every experience. And eventually, if you start reframing things, because the way it happened and the trauma that was, that's real. That doesn't change. But you take a snapshot of that and say, that doesn't serve who I want to be in going forward in my life. So you still hang on to it. So I know a lot of people get scared about giving up their story because they don't know who they are without their story. And I want to say, it's not that you're this or that, you're this and that. So you are what happened to you, but you're also what you're going to be in the future. And those things don't have to be the same or even related to each other in any capacity. You're unlimited. It's not the sky's the limit. It's not that your mind's the limit. There are no limits, period. There's no reason to put limits on who you can be and who you are. You know, I look at it like this. If I could take Mike Fallett's life and write it on a string, and I cram that string into a box and grab the very end of it and just pull it out. And your experience of the now is as you leave the box coming out. And then you get to see who you are. You can see who you are as I pull that string out. Well, guess what? You were always everything. It was just, you have to go through time to experience the revelation of it. And just
like
be
said,
that. And
like you said, they don't have to be connected, right? Who you were and who you're going to become, there might not be an easy stepping stone. It doesn't need to make sense. You can redefine your life at any moment.
At any moment, and live to that, because I lived my whole life as basically a jackass, but it was done in insecurity because I thought that's who I thought I had to be to take my piece of the world. And it really wasn't, I didn't want to hurt other people, but it was more important that I not get hurt than they not get hurt. And now I can be completely different. It's like no one has to get hurt. They can be who they are. I can be who I am. And guess what? If my position is hurting them, I am secure in my integrity. So I can take a snapshot of my position, put it in a safe, never touch it, and go live in their perspective. Go live where their integrity is at and meet them and give them the peace of mind that they need to feel secure so that they can then accept my perspective, which is different from theirs.
One question I've been wrangling with, and I want to ask you, I've never asked anybody this though. One question I'm struggling with is, all right, if I'm a true believer in the Bible, and I believe that at the end of this life, at the end of the Bible, it's Saint Michael and all of his angels taking out the evil, the devils. I believe that. I'm going to be next to Saint Michael. I got a sword in my hand. I can't wait for it, right? Don't know when that's going to be. But if that's the end, and I'm building these businesses and doing all this great stuff for generational wealth and creating all this impact, what does it all mean, right? the way I fight that is, as long as I'm living my purpose, that's all that matters. God has given me tools and resources. I'm going to apply them. But I don't even worry about the generational wealth, the legacy anymore as much as I did, because at the end of all this, it's all going away. This world that we know, cars and houses and all this stuff, eventually it's gone. So what does it matter? But you only earn your place next to St. Michael if you live your purpose. How do you look at that? If someone asks you, hey, if the Bible is real and that all this ends, why do anything? What would you say?
Well, I believe the Bible is 100% real, but it's not real from just one aspect. It's real from all aspects. And the Armageddon that I fought and won, I believe I've already fought. I fought that whenever I abandoned what the world and society told me I was. And that destroyed evil in my life. And I think that it's not a thing after death. It's a thing you experience here. And that's why Revelation is so difficult to understand about end times and the Christian narrative. That's why me and the Christians are, that's why I can't consider myself a Christian. It's offensive to them. You know, we're both followers of Christ, but they believe the Bible at one level, and I believe it at a completely different level that sort of offends them. And that's fine. I don't need their approval. I'm not seeking their approval, but I don't believe the narrative of evil has to be overcome by good outside of myself. It has to be accepted that I am the evil one. I am the enemy. I am the one that makes those decisions that ruin my life or ruin the lives of others. And so when St. Michael is fighting, he's fighting, that's me fighting my own self, the different aspects of me. And so that's, for me, is heaven. I believe I've been living in heaven for about 12 months now, absolutely just joyful with every moment of my life. You know, haters come on to me. I had a guy come on my social media and call me a retard. And I didn't deny it. I said, man, I think you're so right. What advice would you give to a retard trying to get ahead in life, trying to be better?
Wow.
And you know what? He shut up. There was nothing to do there. And, you know, that's the kind of evil that comes at us. And I could project that guy as being evil, or I could just understand that that's his perception of me. And he's got some insecurity in his life, and he's needing me to interact with him and validate those insecurities. And I just don't validate them. I say, man, I thank you for your perspective. I can definitely see how I could be perceived that way. Do you have any advice to help me? And then I never had an enemy outside of myself. My enemy was inside of me.
You diffused it. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I showed him love. I mean, really, I appreciated his value.
Last question I have for you. Those individuals out there who do not believe in God, and they ask you, you know, how do I find God? How do I know he's real? What would you say to these people? Because 95% of my clients are true believers, right? They believe in God or they believe in Jesus, whatever, however they look at it. But there are a few that they're atheists. And I don't think I could say anything or do anything. I just live in a way that I act as if God has blessed my life. That's the only thing I do. So what do you do? What do you say if anybody asks you about that?
Well, very few atheists that I've ever met are happy people. They are their own God, and they create their own hell and live in it and try to bring as many people as they can into that hell. And it's destructive for them and the people around them. And they experience that day after day because all they can do is sit and snipe at other people. They can't be out in the open and voice what they're saying without spewing all kinds of hatred and vitriol. Because if they truly believed that there was no God, then why would they care if I believed in one? Why would they care at all? But they do. They actually hate that I believe in a God. And that just doesn't make sense. So when I'm dealing with an atheist, and if I desired for them, if they desired to be free from that prison that they've created for themselves, I would tell them, it's like, man, I was in a church, a charismatic, Bible-believing church taught by one of the most renowned preachers in the world, or teachers in the world, for 20 years. And I got a full understanding of the Word of God in different contexts. And I left Christianity to find Jesus. I left religion to find God. And God is everywhere outside of religion. Now, maybe it's inside of religion for a lot of people, but for me, I found him after 20 years. Maybe he was there initially and introduced me and crossed that bridge of not believing to believing, and then gave me the word for 20 years so that I could abandon the milk that is there that got me to across the bridge to the meat. And so if an atheist were to come to me today and say, hey, tell me about God, I would say, just close your eyes, take a breath, feel your heartbeat. That silence, that complete, utter zero, the null. I said, that's where I find God.
Mm.
And if you can't find God there, then I really don't know how to help you. But it's in the silence. It's in, because the laws of creation say that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So every time you pull away from God, he pulls you back, which creates a rebound the other direction. And you have to be willing to endure that rebound. Or if you're going the other way, if you're going through a hard time, you will rebound to the upside, and you have to be willing to how far you can go down is how far you can go up, but you have to be willing to go to the extremes and accept them as that's what's required.
Do you believe you have to surrender? I mean, you can
100%.
Yep.
All at all times and everything, all times. Nothing is as we think it is. It's all a perspective. It's all fluid. Nothing changes. That's why time is nothing more than demarking the events, right? That's the only reason we think time exists is because how do we explain what happened when we were 5 versus when we're 50? It's like we have to invent time so we can talk about that. But in God's world, it's all the same. There is no time saying it's this and then it's that. It was always that. It was just being developed, and we call that time. It is always surrendering what was, always.
Great, man. Yeah, I've interviewed a few people and they said, hey, I tried everything on my own. I tried to build a business and I tried to find happiness and all that. And there was one moment where I said, I did it my way. Now it's time to do it your way, to God. And that's when it all changed.
That moment for me was 12 years ago when I put a gun to my head and pulled the trigger. And it didn't go off. I pointed at the ground and pulled it again and it went off. And I said, okay, God, I surrender.
Oh, it meant one last, you got a chance here. This is yours now, right? So that was your sign that you needed.
Yeah. And what's funny is I went the exact opposite from God from that point. I went to serve myself in that. I had been trying to live for God, thinking I was living for God, and I just couldn't do it. It was miserable. And whenever that happened, I surrendered to God, but I ran in the opposite direction, much like Jonah did, thinking I was right. It's like, okay, I'm gonna live for myself for a while. Or no, I'm gonna live for myself from now on, actually, and not try to be somebody else's image of what they think I am. I'm gonna be me. And in doing so, it went from horrible to absolutely worse. And then I believe one day I was actually working in God. I was working in the yard. I remember it very specifically, and it was a bad day. Everything in the world was going wrong, and I absolutely took full responsibility in the moment for not being prepared for the day that I was experiencing. It was my choice to go have that day unprepared, and so the results of that was 100% mine. And I think that's when God gave me freedom to say, "Now you're getting it. When you're suffering, you're choosing the suffering. You might as well enjoy it because you chose it." And in doing that, I believe God said, now that you're living your life the right way, go find one more person and see if you can't help them do the same thing. And he put a name on my heart. So everything I do, like talking to you, all I'm doing is practicing for that one name on my heart, that I believe that they will see Jesus in me and change their life for that.
That's it right there. It reminds me of Christmas Mass when the pastor comes out and has a candle in a totally dark room and then hands it off to another person. And then that person hands it off to another, and the candles just start to light up the room and it becomes extremely bright. So, right, you live as if God has rigged the deck in your favor, and
Absolutely.
individuals see that, and then they start to light up their own candle and then share that with the world. Amazing way to look at it. Daniel Walker, best-selling author of The Accountable Life, the ultimate guide to fulfillment for high achievers. It's an Amazon bestseller. Pick it up today. You can get in touch with him via Facebook. Is that the best way to reach you, right?
Facebook is where I'm at most of the time, yes.
Yep. So Daniel Walker on Facebook, look him up. Get the book, though. Check it out. And if you are in a tough situation, if you are a high achiever and you're looking to maybe better your life in many different ways, get this book, and things are going to start to work in your favor, right? Act as if God has rigged the deck in your favor and everything works out. Daniel Walker, thanks so much. Anything else you want to share with the audience?
We just want to express my gratitude to you, Mike. I really appreciate what you're doing and the spirit in which you're doing.
Thank you, man. It's been an honor to work with you. And I can't wait to see this book even climb the ranks even more after this podcast. So Thanks again, guys. Remember, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life. Right on.